Hey, everybody, it's another Playful Humans podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague, and my guest this week is Emma Stroud. She is a clown, and we're going to talk to her about her new book, Lessons from a Clown. You can also check out the Clowning Around with Emma Stroud podcast, and she's a comedian, MC, author, and more. We're going to find out how she is playing for a living. If you would like to learn more about that for yourself or inspire yourself to rediscover the power of play, engage with your life, find more fun, flow, fulfillment, go to playfulhumans.com. And, I forgot to mention you can find Emma Stroud at emmastroud.london. Here we go.
Don't wait for tomorrow. Keep chasing the sunshine.
All right, here we go, Em. We like to start with the joke of the week. The joke of the week is brought to you by Weight Loss Diets. I was going to start a new diet, but I have too much on my plate right now. Em, here is the joke of the week. This is just a simple one for you this week. A guy walks into a bar. He was immediately disqualified from the limbo contest. All right.
I mean, he's on fire. You're on fire with these jokes, aren't you? It's like, I'm kind of inspired to kind of go, this fire's on fire, but not really with those jokes.
Not really with those.
No.
The jokes could be better, but the subject matter is awesome today because I can tell we're kindred spirits already. You do a lot of cool stuff like emceeing and stand-up comedy and clowning. So
Yeah.
I guess the first question for a clown would be, how do you get into that? Were you always interested from the time you were young and something you wanted to do?
Yeah, I went to uni and studied theatre, and one bit of uni was we got to do some clowning, and I loved it. And my very first experience of clowning was we actually brought in some kids, and I made this child cry, which I was like, this is probably not what I should be wanting to do. And then from that sort of moment, I then got to kind of experience sort of commedia dell'arte, which is over in Italy, which is kind of where pantomime comes from, and then got to really kind of start to play with, right, okay, what does clowning look like? What does it feel like? And actually clowning for me is one of the most joyful things, and it's a state, and it's kind of accessing a part of myself that's kind of full of wonderment and joy, and everything's possible. And then I sort of dropped it for a bit, did proper grown-up business stuff and improv and shows, and then about 4 or 5 years ago reconnected with it and went and worked with one of the top clowns in the world, and just kind of remembered, it's like the Shakespearean fool and the court jester. So we're us clowns with the truth tellers, and we come from a place of kindness, and we're not all scary. So that only happened in the 60s that it started to become proper scary, right?
I was gonna bring that up because my wife does not like clowns, and her brother doesn't either. So something happened when they were kids that got terrified of clowns.
Something happened.
I watched that. Have you ever seen Attack of the Killer Clowns from Outer Space?
I have, yes.
Yeah, that one I watched when I was way too young. I was like 12 years old at my grandma's house, staying up late and like watching HBO, and I had nightmares for years after that. But I love clowns. I'm still fun with it.
And not all clowns, we don't all put loads of face makeup, that's why it's really important, there's a distinction, the theatre clown, and it's that, it's a really beautiful, wonderful state to be in, and people feel it, because even if you're a grumpy clown, you're still coming from a place of kindness. And so when people feel that, they're like, oh, okay. So Orange, who co-wrote my book, who's one of my clowns, Orange is like the lightest, the funniest, and the most possible part of me. So, what's not to love about being in that place, right?
Yeah, I think it's awesome. The closest I can think of is I did some mascotting, and I feel like that's very similar. You're in a costume, you're trying to be playful, have fun with people, and you can make kids cry very quickly if you approach from the wrong angle. But
it's certainly a big thing, yeah.
But I had a lot of fun with that, and I think you're onto something there with the attitude that people don't do that. You have an alter ego there, so it's not even for like the publicity and fame necessarily. It's really one that's for the audience, that it's not about the clown. Is that right?
Yeah,
or would you say?
It never, for me, clowns don't have any ego. And I mean, clowns, to sort of get too deep, but clowns have been around with us since humans have been here, right? So in various tribes and various cultures, clowns are as important as the philosophers. They're as important as their sort of religious person, because they know that the clowns will tell the truth. And so for me, because, you know, I've spent lots of time in the business world and coaching people and working with speakers and stuff like that, honestly, I sort of learned so much from my clown, you know, which was why I ended up calling the book Lessons from a Clown, because at the moment, they're always kind of quite disparate. You know, the world of clowning and play and the world of business and being an adult, which is why I love everything you're doing. It's like, actually, you know, we really should be allowed to kind of explore that joyful, that playful part of us, our brave part. And for me, it was when I reconnected with clowning in my sort of late 30s, suddenly it was like the rest of my world made sense. And so it's like, yeah, you know, we should just, you know, have more fun, right?
Well, that's what I landed on too, and for me, it was reconnecting with music and performing again too. Kind of right at late 30s, early 40s here, and I think it's interesting. Why do you think people lose it? I mean, naturally, when we're kids, we love to play. We know how to play. We'll take chances, and maybe we don't love the improv or the, you know, acting role plays we play in primary school, but I think we still do them, and we find other ways to play. So, what do you think? Is it just society telling us that we need to be serious and work hard?
I think a little bit of it's to do with society. I think it's also that, you know, as we become more consciously aware, you know, lots of adults go, but I don't know how to play them, because they've been very busy being adults, right? And they become a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher or a full-time parent, whatever it might be. And society, I think you're right. Society kind of goes, in order to be a successful adult, you have to be very serious. And then fun is sort of like when you go to the comedy clubs or when you're with your friends, that's when you're allowed to laugh. And that's why I love your theme music, because it's like, no, today, if you allow yourself to laugh today, then actually you'll feel better. Now, never do I suggest that everything should all be about comedy and stuff, because when we were little and when we kind of look at a nursery or reception, so kids about 3, 4, all of those kids will play differently, you know. So some kids will play with Lego, some will be in the sand, some will be an invisible friend, some will be drawing stuff and all of that thing. And that's the same as, I think, of us as adults. It's like, how do we give ourselves some permission to explore what play looks like for us? And in order to do that, you actually have to create some space and some time and to prioritize it. Otherwise, suddenly, before you know it, you're 65 or 70, and you look back on your life and you go, well, sent a lot of emails, made a bit of cash. But actually what we remember, right? What we remember is the stuff that makes our hearts sing. We remember the joyful times. So for me, it's really important that we go, actually, that is super important, and kind of challenge the status quo of where adulting is. Because to me, balance, you've got to be happy and then feel sad and feel it all, you know?
Yeah, I love that you talked about the different ranges. I think far too many people try to like smooth out their life. They don't want any wrinkles in it. They don't want those ups and downs. And most people, if you ask them, would say, "Oh, I want the ups, but not the downs." And you go, "Well, it doesn't work that way. You got to feel all these things, and in order to move and make progress, you're gonna have to have some downs and some ups." That's the way waves
because
work,
it's
right?
and it's that then allows us to play. It's that, you know, it is that fullness of that spectrum of the human experience, and play is just one facet of it. And then when you kind of get to really experience the really down times, then the really up times are properly amazing. And rather than kind of feeling like you're existing and kind of on a conveyor belt of doing one thing to another, actually, why are we here if not to live really fully? And that for me is one of the things that clowning, I mean, I've improvised for 20 years of my life, and I know you're an improviser as well. It's that thing of, for me, clowning is an even more kind of heightened state of like, I am ready, I am here, and I'm open. And then that affects me, you know, even when I'm having some crap times, you know, which we all do have, you know.
Well, you hit on a bunch of good things there for me. Number one is that presence. I know that I'm in play when I'm fully engaged and present. I don't have time or open bandwidth to think about the laundry I'm doing or the, you know, the bills I have to pay and stuff. It's that I'm really diving in and enjoying the moment, fully present in whatever I'm doing. But I love that you talked about improv, because I think far too many people think that that's like a special skill or it's only for comedy or performers, but for me, that's the only way to live life. I think we all learned that in the pandemic, and some people still think, "Oh, what we didn't do is we didn't control enough stuff. We didn't, itemize enough things on the spreadsheet to keep track of, or we could have put that one on." And it's like, no, you're never going to figure it out. There's way too much stuff. So I have some great examples that you can steal. If you have like 6 8-studded Lego blocks, you can combine them more than 100 million possible combinations.
I love that. That's
blocks.
cool.
So what makes you think with 6 human beings, you can combine them in some sort of optimized way, or all of the different things in your life, they become so big that even our supercomputers can't process. And with artificial intelligence, we can't process all the possible outcomes. There's too many. It would take years. So the only option then is to improvise, is to do one line at a time, to, do the next right thing. I think I stole that from Frozen, but
Frozen 2, if you haven't seen it, kids, good film.
Yeah. but I mean, it has to be that way anyway. You might fool yourself that you can control a few things and maybe you can influence some things along the way, but nothing is guaranteed or safe anyway. You might as well have fun with it.
Yeah, and it is. And I think with improv, I mean, I've been talking to people in very big grown-up businesses about improv for a really long time for exactly the reasons you said. And actually, the thing is that the skills of improv, anybody can choose to learn. But we all have them. It's just that we forget them. And actually with improv, once you know that, you can then trust that the right thing will come out at the right time, because improv is not about winging it. I hate it when people go, improvising, winging it, you're making it, it's like, no, you're actually using the skills and you're listening and responding, and it's about trusting yourself at that moment, the right thing will come. And also whoever you're playing with will also give you beautiful gifts that you can respond to, which surely is the same as life, right? If you let yourself see the wonderment of the world and you have these little gifts and these little connections, and it could just be somebody at a coffee store, you just have a chat with them and you really listen and you're really present, you feel that human connection. That in my mind is improv. That in my mind is play, right? And people go, I can't improvise. I've never improvised ever at all. Definitely not an improviser. I'm like, had you planned to have this conversation with me? No.
Just script it all out.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's that thing of, and allowing ourselves to be present, because as you rightly say, we don't know what's going to happen in 2 minutes after this. So it's actually, how do you enjoy the moment? And for me, playfulness and improv in particular is a gift for that, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think you hit on a great point there, that winging it is not what we're going for. It doesn't mean that like planning or goal setting or having some idea of where you're going is a bad idea. That's probably a good thing, right? I think it's more about giving up the control of those things and how you're going to get there, or how things are supposed to go, because I think that's what causes people so much stress, is that we should do this, or things should have been this way, or it's not fair if they're like this. And you're like, that's where I think a lot of people kid themselves and they get too worked up and stresses when they're trying to take things outside of their control, or in the future or the past, which is huge too, right? We get a lot of stress from worrying about the future or holding on to baggage from the past. And when you're improvising and you're present again, that's where it gets so good and so interesting for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that word that you said maybe 3 or 4 times there should be banned. That should word. I should have done that better. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. And it's like, whoa. You are doing what you're doing. Just be, for me, one of the things that Orange, my clown, taught me, it's about being kindness. It's about being kind to yourself, right? And you have to be kind and gentle to yourself. And if you're kind and gentle to yourself, then well, anything is possible in that moment. And then you can then really enjoy a full and amazing life.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I want to ask you more about the book and Lessons from a Clown, because you've mentioned a couple of things, that I think are hard concepts for people to grasp on, even, being kind or kind to themselves. But you also, when you're talking about a clown, kind of mentioned the energy and the emotion in that and giving. And I think sometimes that's one of those things that's ironic, kind of like play in life, is that like, if you're trying to be more genuine, that's not being genuine, right? If you're trying to be more kind to other people, that's not really kind, that's self-serving. So can you talk a little bit about what's that like as a professional, and maybe those lessons of how does that manifest, or maybe what could somebody who hasn't been a clown learn from that?
Yeah. I think you're right. And I mean, as I sit here as a 43-year-old woman, I've had to work really hard to get to these places where I'm like, right, well, these were the lessons, right? This has been my work and my life's journey, and I think it will continue to do. And I get it, because this whole idea of, yeah, but I don't even know how to be kind to myself, and I don't want to be forced, and I don't want to push anything. For me, it's about that simple thing of, this is me as M, not me as a clown. It's like, how do we talk to ourselves, right? And we all go in the world, we all play different roles, right? So you might be, I don't know, a teacher. You might just be a teacher at a primary school, right? And then you then go home and you're a friend, and then you go home and then you're a sister or a wife or a mother or a daughter, and all of those are different roles, and you'll play them in the way that's completely natural to you. And you wouldn't perhaps have thought about it in that way. But if you take a step back, it's like, okay, so how do I want to choose to show up? And what I've seen, having worked with thousands of people, is quite often we will go and be brilliant and be extraordinary, and the only person that we critique with no kindness is our inner voice. And it's that piece of like, but I'm not good enough, or I could have done that better. And actually, one of the things that Orange really taught me was, when I sort of reconnected with that part, Orange sort of saw the beauty that I had, and the sort of the wonderment that me as M I could have, which at some points I was really bad. My inner voice, that inner critic that we all have, it's like, but you should do this, M. You should definitely not tell the world you're a clown. You should definitely only go and do all of those kind of shoulds, and that put down. So for me, in order to be kind, one of the first things is that you have to slow stuff down. And you have to check in with like, okay, how am I really thinking? And what am I truly saying to myself? And loads of people kind of say, would you talk to yourself in the same way if you were talking to your best friend? And most people go, no, of course not. And for me, it's like, so how do you then shift it? And one of the ways that I have found really useful for me is that in the mornings, I sit down and I write, and I just write sort of 3-4 pages just to get my brain and just to get that kind of voice out. And this comes from Julia Cameron and The Artist's Way, which is a great book. And that, by its very nature, I could then start to see certain things of like, wow, I really beat myself about that. Wow, that's a consistent piece. And I talk about in the book, like, I'm not a writer, right? And the journey that I've had to go on, I'm a performer. I'm like you, I'm a performer. I've been in business, I'm MC, all of that felt really comfortable. So I had to go through my own journey of like, how do I shift my own narrative so that I can write this book that I want to write? Because to start off, I was like, well, this is awful. You're dyslexic. You can't write. You are terrible. Why are you writing? And so it's a journey. And I think we all know inherently how kindness feels. But I think I do believe most people are really good. And I think generally we can be kind to others. And so we do know how to be kind to ourselves, but I don't think we spend enough time working out what that means or what that looks like. So for me, in order to kind of shift and kind of go from being good to great, or to kind of shift to say that you're really kind to yourself, you have to slow everything down. And when you slow stuff down, magic happens.
Yeah, so much good stuff in that. I have a lot of questions. First one, comment. I wrote a book too, and I think it's so interesting that the only way to write a book is one line at a time. You have to improvise it. I mean, you can do your research ahead of time. You can plan an outline and everything, but it's one word at a time until you get to the end. I'm a little dyslexic as well. So spell check is a friend for sure.
I mean, whoever came up with the word dyslexia for dyslexics, I mean, they were genuinely having a laugh, weren't they? They were like, for the people that can't spell, here's the word that we're going to give you,
Exactly. It's so crazy. But the one I heard that I wanted to ask you about too here that I think is interesting is the alter ego of Orange, because I had Romeo as my stage name because of my last name. So I found some interesting things about having an on-air persona, which was I could basically be anonymous when I'm not on the radio or DJing. but also it kind of like it helps me separate those thoughts in my head and to have a performance. And the third thing I think for me was it was really interesting is you saw different relationships, right? Most of people in my family would call me Mike, of course, but people that didn't know me would call me Romeo out in public. And so then there's some, you know, people that are coworkers or whatever that kind of knew both. But it was really interesting to kind of go, oh, you either know me or you don't know me based on the name you're calling me. And you kept telling me kind of what persona to be in and stuff. What lessons did you learn just simply by having an alter ego?
I think so. I've got 3 clowns, and I'm very clear. These are clowns. I'm not nuts or anything like that. They're very, very clear and specific. And each of them play a different role for me. And each of them are a different facet. And just like you said, you know, when you were Romeo and people knew you as that, that was the part of you that you cultivated and you created. It is as real, I believe, as Mike, because you were out there living it. It's not, and they're very different, you know, and being a trained actor, my clowns are not me being a part. They are a part of me, if that makes sense. You know, when I play a part because somebody has written something and crafted something, I inhabit another human being and become them and move differently. These 3, they are part of me, you know, probably more similar and akin to how you were as Romeo. And I guess for me, with all 3 of them, what they do is they give me, I'm going to go back to that word, they give me permission to explore the parts of me that perhaps as M I wouldn't do. And I remember on this occasion, I was doing a show. And I was doing a show just off the West End in London, and it was partly me, and then Orange would come on, and Orange was there welcoming everybody in. And Orange welcoming everybody in, Orange saw this lady, and this lady sort of sat down. Now, as me, as M, I would never say this, but as Orange literally was like, you have the most amazing eyes. And she was wearing this necklace that Orange kind of zoned into and was like, this is so beautiful. And this woman just beamed because it was like, she was seen and she was really properly seen. And I was, as Orange, I was so effusive about how amazing her eyes looked and how her eyes matched this thing. And this woman felt it. And then afterwards in the bar, when I met her, she just came up and she just went, I've never felt such a connection. And I was like, wow, as M, especially being a Brit, you know, I wouldn't possibly go up to somebody and go, hello, your necklace is amazing. Yeah. You know, it's not how us Brits are programmed. So Orange allows me to say things that perhaps I wouldn't. And with my other 2 clowns as well, same, but just kind of different ways.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and it's a good lesson for people listening or watching, is that when you get into this playful state, things happen and you do bring out parts of you and you start to take on that persona, just like we've all probably experienced, you know, where even if you're just playing tag or something, right? Like you're in a different energy state than you normally are. So different things happen and you react differently to other things. Or when you're painting or drawing or creating or listening to music, you're putting yourself in different states and you're thinking about different things that for you and I doesn't happen at work. So I know we've mentioned the business side, a couple of things, but I thought we should take a second to talk about why this is important for performance too, because it's not just a good idea. I mean, sure, it's fun, right? But for me, that's not even what it's about. That would be enough for me. But I've learned that for me to do my best work, for me to be as creative as I can, for me to be my full self in my personal life, I have to play. I have to put myself in these different states to get these different energies and connections. But what have you learned for business or performance, kind of the positive side effects of play outside of doing it?
I mean, there's so many. I mean, in the business world, I'll start with that. In the business world, what I notice is that when I give others permission to play, the connection that human beings have, suddenly you pull away all the masks, you pull away all the facades of, you know, professionalism, and you see them connecting heart to heart versus head to head. And when us as humans connect heart to heart and they're playing and they're open, then when you then go into your very grown-up marketing meeting or whatever else it might be, you've connected on a different level. And even if it's 2-3 minutes of play before you do something, it shifts everybody. Like you say, you know, it changes your energy, it changes your state. And I think especially, you know, a lot of us have had to work at home and work online and stuff, changing our state and getting into that place of flow is really, really important. So I think for business, that for me is probably the main thing that I see. It's a deeper connection, and it's that human connection, which is surely the point of us being alive.
Right. I mean, yeah, you said that a couple of times too. I believe, I've kind of done the math, and for me, I think the whole point of being alive has to be alive and to enjoy the ride, right? Can't be to send more emails,
No,
and stuff, so.
And it's that thing, isn't it? Nobody wants to kind of look back. There's a book, isn't there, the 5 lessons from the dying, and all of them, and the one that's always really stayed with me is that I wish I'd allowed myself to be happier. And for me, when you kind of really think about it, when you really let yourself play with your kids, and not play in a way that an adult thinks you should play, let your kids lead you, let them be the guides, because they remember, they know it, they're already in it. Then when you do that, and then you can move away from kids, and you can start to play in whatever adult way that is, then suddenly you're in this place of wonderment and joy, which is surely got to be the point, right?
I love it. Once again, we're talking with Emma Stroud. You can find her at emmastroud.london, clown, comedian, author, and more. Check out Lessons from a Clown, the book, or the Clowning Around with Emma Stroud podcast. Since you are listening to a podcast right now, wherever you're listening to it, just go check it out. All right. Are you ready to play a game?
Yeah, always.
All right. Spinning the wheel, games. There are 10 games that it could land on, and you got... choose your own game. You get to choose your own game here. So do you have an icebreaker game, or
we could if you're up for playing too, we could play.
I'm in.
I mean, I feel so.
No, I don't play.
Can you imagine if you went, no, today I don't feel like playing. Today's not the day. Everyone be like, Mike, what's happened to you? Where are you? Bring Romeo back. So let's play 8 things. So I'm going to tell you a thing. And then you've got to say 8 of them, okay? And I will count along with 8. Okay, so Mike, 8 types of shoes. Go.
Ooh, dress shoes, running shoes, dance shoes, football cleats, for sure. Stiletto heels,
5.
Snowshoes.
6.
Did I say tennis shoes?
No, tennis. 7. Got one more.
And bowling.
Yes, he did it. And I love how many sport variations of shoes that you did. It's like, let's spot the man.
You can tell how I play, right?
Yeah. And then throw in a stiletto just occasionally, right?
Yeah, right. Just a little something for myself and the ladies. Here we go. All right, 8 things for you. Let's go. Candy bars.
Mars bar, Snickers bar, Boost bar, Fudge bar, Dairy Milk, Twix, Kit Kat, and Bounty, the dark one.
Nice. There you go. I like that because half of them you could have completely made up, and I wouldn't know because they're not in the United States.
I did suddenly go, I don't know how many of these I know from, and I was like, American candy bars I would struggle with. I'm going for it. Going for it. Yeah. No,
that's why I wanted to do one that would be different for people listening over here. It'd be fun. All right, awesome. Well, thank you for playing. That was super fun and super easy. That's easy, right? I think if you want to start a company meeting or something else, ask everybody to name a candy bar, name their favorite restaurant, whatever. Go around, get their brains thinking about something other than the next marketing meeting.
And then what's amazing, if you're doing it virtually, then people can just put it in, they can help you out and put it in the chat box as well.
I love that. Any final thoughts, asks, gives for the audience?
I just want to say thank you very much for having me. And I think finally, it's like, just give yourself that chance to play just a little bit every day and then notice how it feels. And if you do that, you can't help but play more.
Well, it was a pleasure to meet you. Super excited about it. I'm a fan of your work. And so keep going, because I think we need so many people spreading this message. There's enough people saying to, work hard and grind and lose sleep to become successful. And that doesn't make any sense at all for me. So I love that we have another awesome, positive voice in the play community. So thank you for being here. Emma Stroud, find her at emmastroud.london, the book and the podcast available as well in the show notes. Until next time, go to playfulhumans.com. There's a quiz where you can find out what your playful personality is. You can join the community. You can have events. We'll host a game show for you or do something fun as well. So go check that out. And until next time, if you can't be good at it. That's what I always say. Go play, everybody.
Don't wait for tomorrow. Live for today. Keep on chasing the sunshine and go out and play.